canal lies in a long, quiet line beneath the evening sky. On one side, the towpath follows the water with the steady plainness of a road made for walking animals and working people. On the other, the bank rises only enough to hold the canal within its engineered course. The surface is not perfectly still. Small movements pass along it, touching the earth at the edge and the darker line of damp stone farther ahead. Nothing here resembles a harbor. There are no broad quays or crowded steps, only an inland waterway, a narrow path, and the measured space between them. Evening softens the separate materials without hiding them. The packed ground of the towpath remains firm in some places and muddy in others. Grass and low growth mark the less traveled edges. Water rests against timber and masonry at the lock ahead, while insects and distant natural sounds occupy the quieter intervals. These details are ordinary rather than picturesque. They belong to a place that must keep working through repeated contact with water, weather, feet, and passing boats. The canal has been built to carry movement, yet much of its time is made of waiting. Farther along the path, the straight watercourse changes shape. Stone walls gather the canal into a chamber. Timber gates stand across each end, and the water beyond them is held at a different height. This is Pennyfield Lock, number 22 in the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal system. Its work is quiet when seen from a distance, but the quiet depends on attention. Someone must notice the level of the water, the condition of the gates, the approach of a boat, and the small signs that an engineered bank or wooden fitting needs care. The evening round begins within that patient responsibility. Pennyfield Lock stands at mile 19.6 of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, in Montgomery County, Maryland. The number fixes it within a long sequence of locks, but the immediate place is compact. An upper reach brings water toward one gate. The stone chamber occupies the middle. A lower reach continues from the gate at the other end. Paths beside the masonry connect these parts, allowing the lock tender to move from one level to the other without leaving the working site. The arrangement is linear, but it is not simply a corridor. Each end presents a different water surface and a different part of the same task. Near the chamber stands Lockhouse 22. Its importance is not that it offers a richly documented interior. The exact arrangement of its rooms and furnishings in 1865 cannot be reconstructed with confidence. What matters here is proximity. A lockhouse placed beside the works kept the lock tender near the gates and the canal. The short distance joined ordinary shelter to continuing responsibility. From the working edge of the house, the upper gate, chamber, lower gate, and stretches of bank remained part of one manageable circuit. The lock did not become remote merely because the light declined. The two water levels give the site its clearest order. Upstream, the canal rests at one elevation. Downstream, it continues at another. Between them, the chamber provides a controlled step. Stone contains the water, timber closes the ends, and iron fittings help the gates and smaller openings perform their work. The path allows repeated inspection from outside the chamber. Seen together, these parts form neither a waterside market nor a place for unloading cargo. They form a machine made at the scale of masonry, moving water, and patient human labor. The evening landscape is therefore also a working diagram, visible in the ground. From either gate, the keeper can understand the rest of the site by following the chamber's length. The upper end leads the eye toward water held higher. The lower end leads toward the continuing canal below. Between them, every crossing of the path repeats the same practical relationship: two reaches, one chamber, and a person responsible for moving safely among them. The Chesapeake and Ohio Canal was built as an inland transportation route beside the Potomac River. Construction began in 1828, and the canal reached Cumberland in 1850. By the middle of the 19th century, its long course connected Georgetown with communities and resources farther west. 74 lift locks, divided the change in elevation into manageable steps. That total helps show the scale of the system, though a lock tender's attention remained local. At Lock 22, the larger canal became a set of immediate things: the level in the upper reach, the chamber between its gates, and the water continuing below. Company rules gave navigation a shared framework. A comprehensive set adopted in 1851 remained in force through the period this episode and long afterward. Rules addressed the movement of boats, conduct near locks, and equipment needed for safe passage. They did not turn every encounter into a dispute. Most of the time, they provided a familiar order that crews and lock tenders could follow with a few practical words. By 1865, this pattern had years of use behind it. The lock was part of a regulated route, and the keeper's work belonged to that continuing institution rather than to an improvised evening routine. Coal became the canal's dominant cargo, especially in the traffic of the later 1860s and 1870s. It is useful background, but it does not need to fill the foreground at Pennyfield. A loaded boat could pass through without turning the lock into a depot. There was no reason for the keeper to unload the cargo or organize a market around it. His concern was passage, bringing the chamber to the right level, guiding movement through the gates, and protecting the waterways' working order. The canal's economic purpose explains why boats traveled here. The lock's operation explains what the evening required. This wider history can remain brief, because the lock makes it tangible. Completion dates, company rules, and the flow of coal all meet at a small set of gates. A route extending for many miles depends, at this point, on the ordinary competence of one keeper. The system is large. The action required at Lock 22 is local, repetitive, and calm. A lift lock solves a simple problem with substantial materials. A canal cannot remain at one elevation across an uneven landscape, but a boat cannot climb a sudden step of water. The chamber creates a temporary enclosed space where the boat and the water around it can rise or fall together. At a typical Chesapeake and Ohio Canal lock, the change was about 8 feet. The exact movement took place within masonry walls, built to resist the steady pressure of water and ground. The chamber was narrow compared with a river, yet large enough to hold a working canal boat between its gates. At each end, paired timber leaves met as miter gates. Water pressing from the higher side helped hold the closed leaves together. Iron fittings connected moving parts and transferred the force of operation. Smaller openings in the gates, usually called wickets in this canal context, allowed water to pass without opening the whole gate. Stone, timber, and iron, therefore, had different jobs. Stone contained the chamber. Timber formed the broad barriers. Iron helped the parts turn, fasten, and endure repeated use. The materials were exposed to dampness, wear, and changing pressure, so their condition mattered every day. The canal itself was also an engineered structure. Its prism, banks, and associated water control works guided water along a route that had to remain usable from one lock to the next. Culverts, feeders, waste weirs, and stop-water devices belong to the wider vocabulary of that system, though not everyone needs to appear beside Lock 22 in this evening. The immediate structure is enough: a stone chamber, timber gates, gate wickets, and the path between upper and lower levels. Modern motors, electric controls, and present-day safety fittings have no place in the 1865 setting. Concrete should not be presented as the original fabric of this lock. The structure's power is easy to overstate if attention moves too quickly toward machinery. Most of the lock has no hidden engine. Its work depends on water pressure, gravity, openings that can be controlled, and gates that move only when levels permit. The keeper supplies judgment and modest force. The canal supplies water. Stone and timber give that water a useful sequence. A National Park Service worker record identifies R. Selby as the lock tender at Lock 22 in 1865. The entry gives a name, a position, a lock number, and a year. It does not provide a personal biography. It does not describe his family, his clothing, his meals, or the arrangement of his rooms. Those details remain outside the evidence. The useful certainty is narrower and more practical. At this place, and in this year, a named employee held responsibility for the lock. His role can be understood through the documented expectations placed on Chesapeake and Ohio Canal lock tenders generally. The lock tender operated gates and wickets, watched the water above and below the chamber, and helped boats pass in an orderly way. He could instruct captains in the use of the lock and enforce company rules when necessary. He also observed the condition of the embankment and nearby works. Small obstructions might receive immediate attention. Damage beyond ordinary care had to be reported so that larger repairs could be organized. None of these duties required constant visible activity. The job mixed brief physical effort with long intervals of observation, availability, and waiting. Lockhouses helped make that availability possible. A keeper living beside the works could answer the needs of navigation without traveling from a distant village each time a boat appeared. The arrangement joined employment and place very closely. The canal company provided housing and, in general, a small plot as part of the keeper's compensation. Yet the lockhouse was not simply a private retreat. Its nearness served the waterway. From the house, a keeper could return to the gate, the chamber, or the bank whenever traffic or the condition of the works required attention. Responsibility was therefore continuous even when effort was intermittent. A closed gate might need only observation for a time. Then an approaching boat could require several connected actions. Afterward, quiet would return, but the keeper still held the same charge. The evening round belongs to this pattern, not the end of duty, but a practical way of confirming that the lock remains ready. An evening inspection can begin at the upper reach, though no surviving instruction fixes one exact closing sequence for Lock 22. The important point is the kind of attention involved, not a ritual that must be performed in a single order. At the upper side, the lock tender could compare the surface of the canal with the marks and edges around the gate. A familiar level offered a baseline. An unexpected change might suggest a problem elsewhere in the system, while a steady level allowed the ordinary round to continue. Observation came before unnecessary action. The path beside the gate gave access to the bank and the masonry, without requiring entry into the water. A keeper could look along the embankment for erosion, animal disturbance, wet ground, or another visible sign that water was moving where it should not. Canal-wide guidance expected regular inspection of embankments and works. The exact things noticed on a particular evening are unknown, so the scene remains modest. A steady walk, attention to the edge of the water, and a pause where timber meets stone. The round is careful because small changes are easiest to manage when found early. At the gate itself, the broad leaves remain closed, while the higher reach presses gently against them. The smaller wicket fittings can be checked without beginning a full operation. There may be dampness at joints and a small exchange of water around imperfect surfaces, but the exact pattern of leakage at Lock 22 is not documented. The keeper's experience would have helped distinguish ordinary seepage from something worth reporting. For now, the level remains usable. The bank gives no reason for alarm, and the circuit moves toward the chamber and the approach beyond it. Regular inspection protects the lock without requiring a crisis. The keeper does not search for danger to make the work meaningful. He looks for continuity. Water where it is expected, earth holding its shape, fittings remaining serviceable, and a path that can be walked. When those conditions persist, the result is uneventful. That uneventfulness is itself evidence of ordinary maintenance doing its job. An evening round might be interrupted by a boat approaching along the canal. No record identifies a particular passage at Lock 22 on a particular evening in 1865, so this movement is a representative possibility rather than a recovered event. It begins without urgency. The boat follows the reach at the slow pace of canal navigation. Its crew has already spent many hours within the routines of towing, steering, and waiting. Cargo may be aboard, perhaps coal moving along the larger route, but nothing is unloaded here. The boat comes to the lock because the water level must change before the journey can continue. The lock tender and the boat crew have different but connected responsibilities. The keeper controls the chamber and gives practical directions. The captain and crew control the boat and its lines. Company rules made this relationship familiar. A few words can establish whether the chamber is ready and how the boat should enter. Towing or snubbing lines may help restrain movement, but rope remains a secondary tool of passage. It is not manufactured, sorted, twisted, or displayed as the purpose of the place. The central work remains the preparation of gates, wickets, and water. Before the gate opens, the water inside the chamber must match the level on the boat's side. Only then can the miter leaves move without the full difference in water pressing across them. Keeper checks the chamber, operates the necessary wickets, and waits for equalization if it has not already occurred. Waiting is part of the procedure, not an interruption to it. The crew holds the boat at a safe distance until a signal or instruction allows entry. The scene contains movement, but it remains measured. Water passing through small openings, a gate turning, and a boat advancing into the space between stone walls. Once inside, the boat is contained for only as long as the level change requires. The chamber is not a warehouse, and the stop is not a trading interval. Crew and keeper share a short period of controlled waiting. Their attention stays on position, line, gate, and water. The canal journey pauses here so that it can continue safely beyond the opposite end. Nothing about this represented arrival requires speed or excitement. Canal traffic depended on accepting the pace imposed by water, gates, and other boats. A crew that had traveled for hours could recognize this pause as one more familiar interval. At the lock, cooperation mattered more than conversation, and careful position mattered more than force. Once the boat is inside, the gate behind it closes. The chamber is again bounded by timber at both ends and masonry along its sides. The next movement belongs mostly to water. A removable lock key, often described as a windlass, engages the mechanism of a gate wicket. Turning it opens the smaller passage through which water can enter or leave. The exact direction depends on whether the boat is traveling toward the higher or lower reach. In either case, the sequence follows the same principle. Secure the broad gates, move water through the controlled opening, and wait. The chamber level changes gradually. Water entering spreads across the enclosed space and lifts the boat with it. Water leaving lowers boat and surface together. The crew does not need to drag the vessel up or down a solid step. Gravity performs the main work, while the shape of the lock keeps that work within useful limits. The lock tender watches the gate, the wicket, the boat, and the changing line of water against the stone. The period of waiting is practical and quiet. It allows pressure to approach balance before the next broad gate is asked to move. When the chamber level matches the destination reach, pressure across the forward gate is greatly reduced. The wicket can be closed, the gate opened, and the boat guided onward. There is no need for a dramatic release. A correct operation ends in balance. The crew gathers its line and continues along the canal. The lock tender remains beside the structure, responsible for leaving the gates and wickets in the condition required for the next movement. The entire passage has alternated short effort with long observation. Turn, wait, watch, open, and wait again. This patient rhythm is the lock's ordinary work. Only one complete explanation is needed, because the same principle governs later passages. Details may vary with direction and starting level, but the lock does not become a different machine each time. The keeper reads the present condition, prepares the chamber, and uses the wickets to approach balance. Repetition in the work creates familiarity. Repetition in the narration can now give way to quieter observation. The final balance also explains why waiting cannot be removed from the process. Water needs time to pass through the wickets and spread across the chamber. Keeper cannot improve the result by turning patience into haste. Observation is active work here. It confirms when the pressure has eased and when the next gate can move without strain. The boat continues away from the lock, and the keeper's attention stays with the works. At the lower gate, the recently moving water settles into smaller currents. A branch, loose plank, or other minor obstruction near a gate or bank could interfere with ordinary use if left in place. Canal maintenance guidance expected keepers to notice such nuisances and deal with what lay within their ability. A small item might be moved aside without turning the evening into a repair operation. Larger damage belonged to another scale of work and would need to be reported. The lower side also offers another view of the masonry, timber, and bank. A keeper likely became familiar with the ordinary dampness of the structure and with the places where water commonly appeared. Repeated visual checks for unusual leakage are plausible, but the exact pattern and order of such checks at Lock 22 are not known. The script, therefore, does not assign a precise defect to this evening. It keeps the attention general. The meeting of gate and wall, the condition of the bank, and whether water seems to be escaping in a way that deserves further notice. By now, the circuit has reached both ends of the chamber. The upper level has been observed. A boat has passed as it might on an ordinary working evening. The water has changed, and the lower side has received its own inspection. None of these actions proves a formal closing routine. They show a keeper maintaining readiness. The path now turns toward the nearby lockhouse, but the movement is not a retreat into a private story. House and lock remain close enough that a pause near one can still belong to the work of the other. Minor care is deliberately separated from major repair. A keeper can notice, clear, and report, but the evidence does not require him to rebuild a gate in the dark or struggle against a sudden failure. The ordinary boundary is calmer. Small nuisances are removed when practical. Structural concerns are passed into the canal company's maintenance system. The evening retains its measured scale. Lockhouses on the lower Chesapeake and Ohio Canal were commonly built of stone or brick, and housing formed part of a keeper's compensation. The buildings placed ordinary domestic space directly beside canal infrastructure. That fact is well supported. The exact private life inside Lockhouse 22 in 1865 is not. The surviving evidence does not justify naming members of Selby's household, describing a particular room, or arranging specific furniture around him. The house can be understood more safely from outside, as shelter kept within working distance of the chamber and gates. A modest meal or domestic pause would be plausible in a lockhouse, but no exact menu, hour, room, or participant is documented for this evening. The same limit applies to clothing. Boots and work clothes suited to damp. These possibilities are therefore left as possibilities, not converted into detailed scenes. The useful ordinary life point is simpler. The keeper's place of shelter stood beside the place where his attention was required, reducing the distance between rest and duty. The lockhouse does not end the working day by itself. Its nearness reflects the opposite condition. A keeper could step away from the gate and still remain available to it. Voices, water movement, or the approach of another boat might call attention back outside. The canal company expected service by day and by night. As darkness deepens, the house and the lock remain part of one small operational landscape. The next movement is therefore outward again, toward the chamber, where the state of the water and mechanisms matters more than any unrecorded domestic detail. This evidence boundary keeps the domestic moment useful without making it fictional. Shelter, proximity, and the possibility of a short pause are enough. A detailed supper, named relatives, or a carefully furnished room would add certainty that the records do not provide. Leaving those details open preserves the ordinary relation that is known. Home stood beside work, because the lock could require attention at any hour. After dark, Lock 22 was not necessarily closed to all movement. The stronger evidence is that lock tenders were expected to remain available when boats required passage. Night navigation had its own precautions, including a light shown by a boat at its bow under company rules. Such a light would belong to the moving boat, not to a lantern-centered story at the lock. From the bank, a keeper could recognize the approach and prepare the chamber. Quiet at one moment did not guarantee quiet for the entire night. Readiness remained part of the job. The removable lock key or windlass also remained part of that readiness. A keeper may have removed or secured a portable key during a quiet interval, but the exact storage practice at Lock 22 is unresolved. It would be too certain to assign the tool a particular hook, shelf, or room. The careful conclusion is only that the operating tool had to remain controlled and available when needed. Gates and wickets could be left in a suitable condition for the present water levels, then checked again if traffic or a change in the canal required another operation. A final walk beside the chamber is therefore a check of condition, not a ceremony of closure. The keeper can look toward the upper reach, follow the line of the masonry, and continue to the lower gate. Water touches the structure in the same place as it did earlier, although the immediate movement of the boat passage has faded. The lockhouse remains nearby. The path remains open between work and shelter. If no boat approaches, no further operation is needed for the moment. The site grows quieter, but it stays within the keeper's responsibility. Darkness changes how the familiar structure is read without changing its arrangement. The chamber still lies between the two reaches, and the path still connects its gates with the lockhouse. Reduced visibility makes knowledge of those relationships more useful. The essential night resources are attention, access to the operating tool, and readiness to respond if the quiet canal begins to move again. The chamber now holds a steady level. The broad gate leaves meet across the water, and the smaller wickets remain in the position required for the present condition. No new boat is entering. No major repair is underway. The work visible at the lock has become smaller. A glance along the bank, a check of the path, and attention to the sound of water against timber and stone. These are not signs that the canal has been sealed for the night. They are signs that nothing more is required at this moment. Throughout the evening, the lock has alternated between movement and rest. Gates have opened only when levels allow them to move. Wickets have guided water through smaller passages. A boat may have occupied the chamber for a short time, then continued along the canal. Before and after that passage, the keeper's work has depended on observation. The upper reach, lower reach, masonry, timber bank, and nearby house have remained connected by the repeated circuit of one responsible person. The machinery is large, but its ordinary care is made of modest actions. As the episode ends, activity continues to diminish. Water presses quietly against the closed leaves of the appropriate gate. The path beside the chamber lies between the two levels, still available for another round if one becomes necessary. The lockhouse stands within working distance. The canal extends beyond both ends of the lock, carrying the possibility of later movement without demanding it now. For the present, the levels are steady, the mechanisms have been checked, and the lock tender remains close enough to answer the waterway. The remaining sounds can settle with the water. Nothing is sealed away. The canal remains a route, the lock remains a working step within it, and the house remains close to the duty it supports. The evening round has reduced uncertainty without pretending to end movement forever. For a while, there is only the maintained balance of two reaches and the chamber between them. That balance gives the closing its quiet form.